Welcome, dear listener, to tonight's Christmas mystery. I'm so glad you're here on this peaceful winter evening. Tonight, we journey back to the winter of 1955 to a small advertising office in Colorado Springs where snow dusts the windowsills and Christmas magic is about to be born from an unexpected mistake. But our story doesn't begin there, it begins with you. Or rather, with someone very much like you. 70 years later, meet Julia Chen, a journalist who discovers an old rotary telephone in her grandmother's attic on a frosty December evening. The phone is cream-colored and heavy, with a paper tag tied to it reading "The Santa Phone, 1955. Inside the phone's cradle, she finds a yellowed newspaper clipping and a bundle of letters that hint at one of Christmas's most beloved traditions, the NORAD Santa Tracker. As carolers sing "Silent Night" somewhere in her grandmother's snowy neighborhood, Julia will unravel a gentle mystery that connects a misprinted phone number, a kindly Air Force colonel, and thousands of hopeful children on Christmas Eve. She'll discover how a Cold War military installation became home to the most magical Christmas operation in history, and why her own grandmother's voice appears on one of those first recordings from 1955. There will be cozy archives to explore, elderly veterans with warm memories to share, old radio recordings to listen to by firelight, and a heartwarming revelation about how mistakes can become miracles. So settle deeper into your blankets. Perhaps imagine the scent of hot cocoa and peppermint, and let us begin this journey back to where Santa tracking started. Before we begin our holiday tale, let's take a moment together to settle in and prepare for rest. Find yourself in a comfortable position, perhaps imagining soft snowfall outside your window, the gentle glow of Christmas lights casting their warm colors across the room, and the wonderful feeling of being safely tucked inside on a cold December night. Let's breathe together now and let go of whatever the day has brought. Take a deep breath in through your nose. 1, 2, 3. Hold it gently for a moment. 1, 2. And now exhale slowly through your mouth. 1, 2, 3. Feel your shoulders drop and soften. Beautiful. You're exactly where you need to be. Safe, warm, and ready for a story that will carry you gently towards sleep. Our story opens on a December evening, 3 weeks before Christmas, as Julia pulls her car into her grandmother's driveway and sees every window glowing with candlelight. The snow had just begun to fall when Julia arrived at her grandmother's house. The flakes so light they seemed to hover rather than descend. The Victorian cottage sat at the end of Maple Street, like something from a Christmas card, white with forest green shutters, smoke curling from the chimney, and a wreath of fresh pine and red ribbon hanging on the front door. Every window glowed with warm light, and Julia could see the silhouette of the Christmas tree in the front parlor, decorated as it had been every year of her childhood. She sat in her car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, watching the snow collect on the windshield. Her grandmother had called that morning with an unusual request. "Come help me sort the attic before Christmas. I found something you need to see." Margaret Chen didn't make dramatic statements lightly. At 89, she was practical, sharp as winter air, and rarely cryptic. But her voice on the phone had carried something Julia couldn't quite identify: excitement mixed with nostalgia, perhaps, or mystery. Julia grabbed her overnight bag and hurried up the shoveled walkway. Before she could knock, the door swung open, releasing a wave of warmth and the scent of gingerbread. "There's my girl," Margaret said, pulling her into a hug. She was small and sturdy, wearing her favorite red cardigan embroidered with snowflakes, her silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn for decades. Come in. The snows started early this year. Inside, the house was exactly as Julia remembered, perhaps even more festive than usual. Garland draped the staircase banister, tied with velvet bows. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 6 times, its brass pendulum catching the light. In the parlor, the Christmas tree reached nearly to the ceiling, covered in ornaments that spanned generations. Delicate glass spheres from the 1950s, handmade felt decorations Julia had crafted in elementary school. And at the very top, an angel with porcelain face and spun glass wings. "Grandma, the house looks beautiful," Julia said, setting down her bag. "Every year I think about simplifying," Margaret replied, leading her toward the kitchen. "And every year I put up everything anyway. What's Christmas without a bit of excess? Tea, please." They settled at the kitchen table with cups of Earl Grey and warm gingerbread cookies. Through the window, Julia could see the bird feeder in the backyard, already accumulating a cap of snow. The kitchen was cozy, with its yellow wallpaper and copper pots hanging from hooks, the old gas stove radiating gentle heat. "So," Julia said, "what's this mysterious thing in the attic?" Margaret's eyes sparkled. "Finish your tea first. It's waited 70 years. It can wait another 10 minutes. Julia smiled. Her grandmother had always had a sense of theater. They talked about Julia's work at the Denver Post, about the Christmas Eve article she was writing on local holiday traditions, about Margaret's book club and the neighbor's new puppy. But Julia could sense her grandmother's anticipation, the way she kept glancing toward the hallway and the stairs beyond. Finally, Margaret stood. "All right then, let's go up." The attic stairs were narrow and steep, the kind that required attention and a firm grip on the railing. Margaret climbed with surprising energy, flicking on lights as they ascended. The attic had always been Julia's favorite room, a long, wood-paneled space under the eaves, filled with trunks and boxes, old furniture draped in sheets, and the accumulated treasures of a long life. Tonight, a small area near the window had been cleared. A card table held a cream-colored rotary telephone, an old wooden box, and several manila folders. The window behind was frosted at the edges, and through it, Julia could see the snow falling more steadily now, illuminated by the street lamp. "I was looking for Christmas decorations," Margaret began, pulling up 2 folding chairs, "and I found this box at the back, under your grandfather's old military things. I haven't opened it in decades, maybe since we moved to this house in '68. She sat down slowly, gesturing for Julia to sit beside her. "This telephone, it's special." Julia examined the phone. It was heavy, solid, the kind that could survive being dropped downstairs. A paper tag dangled from the rotary dial on a piece of faded red string. In careful handwriting, it read, "The Santa Phone, 1955. The Santa Phone." Julia touched the tag gently. "Look inside the box." Julia opened the wooden box with careful hands. Inside, nestled in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, were several items. A newspaper clipping from the Colorado Springs Gazette, dated December 26, 1955. A bundle of letters tied with ribbon, several black and white photographs, and what looked like an old reel-to-reel tape. The newspaper headline read, "Air Force Tracks Santa. Children's Christmas Wish Leads to Holiday Tradition." Julia looked at her grandmother. "I don't understand." Margaret smiled, the same mysterious smile from the phone call. "Neither did I at first. But when I started reading those letters, looking at the photographs, Julia, I was part of something wonderful, and I'd nearly forgotten. Or maybe I'd packed it away so carefully that it felt like a dream." She touched the telephone with one finger. "This is the phone that started the NORAD Santa tracker." Julia set down the newspaper clipping carefully. "What? Not the actual phone from the military base, of course, but the same model from the same time. Your grandfather brought it home for me as a memento. And these," she touched the bundle of letters, "these are from the children who called that first night. The snow outside had thickened into a proper snowfall, and the attic felt separate from the world, like a ship floating through clouds." Julia could hear the furnace humming somewhere below, and distantly, the sound of Christmas music from a neighbor's house. "Tell me," Julia said softly. Margaret poured 2 cups of tea from the thermos she'd brought up. She'd planned this moment. Julia realized and began to speak. "It was December 1955, Margaret said, her voice taking on the cadence of memory. "I was 19 years old, working as a telephone operator for the Continental Air Defense Command, CONAD, they called it. It was before NORAD, before the official joint command with Canada. But it was the same facility, the same mission, watching the skis for Soviet bombers." Julia sipped her tea, letting her grandmother's words paint the scene. "We were in Colorado Springs, at what would become Cheyenne Mountain. The Cold War was very real to us then. Every day we answered calls about potential threats, scrambled fighters, tracked unknown aircraft. It was serious work, and we were serious people. Your grandfather was a colonel then, working in operations. We'd been married 2 years. Margaret opened the newspaper clipping and smoothed it flat. Then came the first Monday in December. Sears Roebuck had placed a large advertisement in the Gazette, a full-page spread encouraging children to call Santa Claus directly. They'd set up a special phone number, you see, with someone to answer and talk to the children about their Christmas wishes. "That's sweet," Julia said. It was, except Margaret's eyes twinkled. Except they'd made a mistake. Someone in the advertising department had transposed 2 numbers. Instead of the Sears Santa hotline, the advertisement gave the phone number to the Continental Air Defense Command Operations Center, one of the most secure, serious military installations in North America. Julia felt a smile spreading across her face. Oh no. Oh yes. It was a Saturday evening, December 24th, when the first call came in. I was working the operations floor. They sometimes had me help during busy periods because I could handle multiple calls efficiently. It was Christmas Eve, fairly quiet, and everyone was hopping to get home to their families. Margaret stood and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. The phone rang on the operations desk, the red phone, the one used for urgent military communications. Colonel Harry Shoup answered it. He was the director of operations, and he expected something important. Military business. Instead, he heard a small voice. A little girl. Julia leaned forward, enchanted. She asked, "Are you really Santa Claus?" Margaret turned back from the window, and in the soft light of the attic, Julia could see the warmth of the memory in her grandmother's face. Colonel Shoup was a stern man, very by the book, but he had children of his own, and this little girl sounded so hopeful, so excited. He could have simply explained the mistake and hung up. But instead, Margaret smiled. Instead, he looked at the radar screen that tracked aircraft over North America, and he said, "Yes, I am. Have you been a good girl?" The wind rattled the window gently, and Julia pulled her sweater closer. The attic felt magical now, suspended in time and snow. The calls didn't stop, Margaret continued. Within an hour, the phone was ringing constantly. Dozens of children, all calling the number from the Sears advertisement, all hopping to talk to Santa. The officers on duty were bewildered, but Colonel Shoup, he made a decision. Margaret sat back down and opened the wooden box, carefully removing the bundle of letters. He assigned 2 of his officers to answer the calls. And then he had an idea. He asked me, because I knew the radar systems, to check the screens and provide updates. Updates on what? On Santa's location. Margaret's smile widened. We actually tracked him, Julia. Or we pretended to, which amounted to the same thing for those children. The radar screens showed aircraft moving across the Northern Territories, commercial flights, military exercises, weather patterns. But that night, one of those blips became Santa's sleigh. She untied the ribbon and spread out several of the letters. They were written in children's handwriting on various types of paper, notebook pages, construction paper, backs of Christmas cards. Dear Air Force Santa, Julia read from the first one. Thank you for telling me Santa was over Chicago. I live in Denver, and I hope he makes it here before bedtime. I have been mostly good. Love, Timothy. Dear Santa Trackers, read another. My mom said you are very important and you have radars. Can you make sure Santa finds our new house? We moved from California. Love, Susan. Julia felt a lump forming in her throat. These children wrote thank you letters to the Air Force, hundreds of them over the next few weeks. The story made the newspaper the day after Christmas. That's the clipping there. A reporter had called the base, wondering why military officers were giving Santa updates on Christmas Eve, and the whole story came out. The misprinted advertisement, Colonel Shoup's decision, the children who called. Margaret picked up one of the photographs. It showed a military operations room, serious-looking men in uniform standing around radar screens. But they were smiling, and one held a telephone receiver, clearly talking to someone. That's Colonel Shoup, Margaret pointed. And that's your grandfather standing by the radar. And that, she pointed to a young woman barely visible at the edge of the frame. That's me. 19 years old, and part of the first Santa tracking operation in history. Julia studied the photograph. Her grandmother looked so young, wearing a dark dress and pearls, her hair in the style of the 50s. She was smiling, holding what looked like a notepad. What were you writing? Notes about Santa's progress. I was creating the script, you might say. Santa's over Canada now. Santa's just passed over Montana. He's heading for Colorado Springs' Better Get to Bed. We made it up as we went along, tracking imaginary positions based on time zones and logic. If it was midnight in New York, Santa would have finished the East Coast. If it was 10 p.m. in Denver, he'd be working his way west. It's brilliant, Julia said softly. It was joyful, Margaret corrected. In the middle of the Cold War, when we spent every day watching for threats, preparing for the worst. For one night, we tracked something magical instead. Something that made children happy. She reached into the box and pulled out the reel-to-reel tape. This is an audio recording from that first night. Your grandfather made it unofficially, probably bent a few rules. But he wanted to remember. We only listened to it once, years later, and then it went into storage. I'd forgotten it existed until I found this box. Can we listen to it? Julia asked. That's why I called you. I don't have a reel-to-reel player anymore, but I thought, you're a journalist. You have resources. And this story, I think it needs to be told properly before everyone who remembers that first night is gone. Colonel Shoup passed away in 2009. Several of the other officers are gone too. I'm one of the last who was actually there. Julia took the tape reel carefully. It was surprisingly heavy, the tape dark brown and spooled tightly. A piece of masking tape on the hub read, CONAD, Christmas Eve 1955 Shoup. I'll find a way to play it, Julia promised. And I'll write the story, Grandma. But I need to know more. What happened after that first Christmas Eve? Margaret poured more tea, steam rising into the cool attic air. Outside, the snow had transformed the street into a winter wonderland. Cars buried under white blankets, trees heavy with accumulation. "That's the really beautiful part," Margaret said. "It didn't end." The next year, people remembered. Parents called asking if the Air Force was tracking Santa again. The local news did a story. So we did it again, more organized this time. Colonel Shoup made it official. By 1958, when CO and AD became NORAD, the tradition had taken root. She showed Julia more photographs. Operations rooms filled with officers and phones. Newspaper clippings from various years. Letters from children around the world. The tradition had grown from one confused evening into an annual event. "Now it's global," Julia said. The NORAD Santa Tracker website gets millions of visitors. There are apps, social media updates, volunteers answering calls in multiple languages. "I know," Margaret said. "I check it every year on Christmas Eve. It makes me happy to know it continued, that something we improvised one night because of a printing error became magic that lasts." Julia gathered the letters, photographs, and clipping, arranging them carefully. "There's enough here for a wonderful article, but I want to do more than that. I want to find the children who wrote these letters, if any are still in the area. I want to interview people who remember Colonel Shoup. I want to understand how this tradition evolved." "Then you should visit the NORAD base," Margaret said. "They have an archives department. And you should talk to Terence Walsh. He's a retired Major General who worked on the Santa tracking program in the 1980s. He lives here in Colorado Springs, and he's a delightful storyteller. You know him. We've stayed connected over the years, those of us who were part of the early days. There aren't many left, but we send Christmas cards, attend the occasional reunion. Terence called me last week, actually. He's organizing a 70th anniversary celebration for the program and wanted to know if I'd be willing to be interviewed." "That's perfect timing," Margaret nodded. "I think it's meant to be. This story has waited long enough to be properly told. And you're the one to tell it, Julia. You understand what it means, the blend of military precision and childlike wonder, the way something beautiful can come from an accident." Julia hugged her grandmother, feeling the soft wool of her cardigan and catching the familiar scent of her lavender soap. "Thank you for keeping all of this. Thank you for caring about it. Now, it's late and I'm an old woman who needs her sleep. You take the guest room. I've put fresh sheets on the bed, and there are extra blankets in the closet. Tomorrow, we'll make a plan for your research." They descended from the attic together, Margaret switching off lights as they went. Julia carried the box of letters and photographs carefully, already imagining the story she would write. In the guest room, her room, really, from all the summers and Christmases she'd spent here. Julia set the box on the dresser and looked out the window. The snow was still falling, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional sound of a car passing slowly on the slick roads. She thought about those children from 1955, calling a military installation, expecting Santa. She thought about Colonel Shoup, who could have been irritated but chose joy instead. She thought about her grandmother, 19 years old, and tracking an imaginary sleigh across imaginary skis, making magic real for children she would never meet. It was, Julia realized, a perfect Christmas story, and it was hers to tell. She changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and climbed into the bed piled high with quilts. From somewhere in the house, she could hear the grandfather clock chiming 11 times. Outside, the snow continued its gentle work, covering the world in white. Tomorrow, she would begin unraveling the full mystery. Tomorrow, she would find the people connected to that first magical night. But tonight, she let herself simply rest, warm and safe, while outside the window, snow fell like a blessing. Julia woke to bright sunlight reflecting off new snow. The guest room was chilly in that pleasant way that makes staying under blankets feel like a luxury. She could smell coffee and something baking her grandmother was already up. After dressing warmly in jeans and a thick sweater, Julia found Margaret in the kitchen taking cinnamon rolls out of the oven. The kitchen table was already set for two, with butter and jam and fresh oranges arranged on a blue ceramic plate. "I called Terence while you were sleeping," Margaret announced, sliding a perfect cinnamon roll onto Julia's plate. "He's expecting you at 10 this morning. I also called the NORAD Public Affairs Office. A lovely young woman named Captain Stevens will meet you at noon to show you their historical archives. They keep quite a collection related to the Santa tracking program." "You've been busy," Julia said, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "At my age, you don't waste time. Besides, it's December 5th. If you want to have this story ready by Christmas, you need to start today." After breakfast, Julia loaded her laptop bag, her notebook, and the box from the attic into her car. The streets had been plowed, pushed into high banks on both sides, making the neighborhood feel cozy and enclosed. Every house seemed to be decorated, wreaths on doors, lights strung along roof lines, inflatable snowmen wobbling in front yards. Terence Walsh lived in a ranch house on the north side of town, with a meticulously maintained yard and an American flag flying from a pole near the garage. He answered the door before Julia could knock, a tall man in his late 70s, with white hair and a warm smile, wearing a red sweater that looked hand-knitted. "You must be Margaret's granddaughter," he said, shaking her hand firmly. Come in. I've got the fireplace going and fresh coffee. I hear you want to know about Santa tracking." His living room was comfortable and masculine leather furniture, military photographs and medals in display cases, and a large Christmas tree covered in ornaments that told stories. Julia spotted several that were clearly military themed. A miniature fighter jet a snowflake with NORAD engraved on it, a small Santa in an Air Force uniform. They settled into chairs near the fireplace, and Terence poured coffee from a French press. "Your grandmother was one of the originals," he said. "Did she tell you about the phone call confusion?" "She did. I'm trying to understand how it evolved from one chaotic Christmas Eve into an official program." Terence nodded, sipping his coffee. "That's the interesting part, the institutionalization of magic, if you will." After the first year, 1955, Colonel Shoup recognized they'd stumbled onto something powerful. It wasn't just good public relations for the military, though it certainly was that. It was meaningful, in a real way. He stood and retrieved a photo album from a bookshelf. "Let me show you something." The album contained photographs spanning decades. Operations rooms from the 1960s with men in uniform answering black telephones. The 1970s with women joining the teams. The 1980s with early computers. The 1990s with the first websites. And eventually modern operations centers with multiple screens and volunteers wearing festive sweaters. "This is a visual history of the program," Terence explained. "I started volunteering in 1983 when I was a captain. By then, it was a well-established tradition, but it still felt spontaneous. We'd set up in the command center on Christmas Eve, and the phones would start ringing around 6 p.m. Children from all over calling to ask where Santa was. What did you tell them? The truth as far as we could determine it." Terence smiled. We'd checked the tracking systems by the 80s. We had sophisticated satellite coverage, over-the-horizon radar, the whole works. And we'd give updates based on time zones and logic. Santa's just finished visiting Japan. He's heading toward Australia now. He should be in Colorado in about 4 hours, so you'd better get to bed. Julia took notes, capturing the details. Did you ever feel silly doing it? Military officers tracking an imaginary sleigh. Never, Terence said firmly. You know what we did the other 364 days a year? We tracked potential threats. We prepared for the worst. We trained for scenarios that would mean millions of deaths. So one day a year, one evening, we got to be part of something purely good. Something that made children happy and families feel connected. It was a privilege. He turned to a page showing a group photo from what looked like the mid-1980s. This was our team from Christmas Eve 1985. 15 of us that year. We answered 12,000 phone calls between 6 p.m. and midnight. Every single one of those calls was someone wanting to believe in magic. Do you remember any specific calls? Terence thought for a moment, staring into the fire. There was a little boy, couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, who called around 9 p.m. He was crying. His mother had just called him in from playing outside, and he was heartbroken because he thought he'd missed Santa. I told him Santa was still over the Atlantic Ocean, heading for the East Coast, and wouldn't be in Wyoming for at least 2 more hours. He got so quiet, and then he whispered, "Really?" with such hope in his voice. That's what I remember most, the hope. Julia felt that lump in her throat again. It matters to them. It matters to everyone. We had adults call too, parents wanting to play along, grandparents asking for updates to share with grandchildren, even teenagers who'd called as children and wanted to hear the tracking one more time. Some years we'd get letters afterward, families sending photos of their children on Christmas morning, thanking us for making the night more magical. He showed her letters similar to the ones Margaret had kept, all expressing gratitude and wonder. The program evolved as technology changed, Terence continued. In the 90s, we started a website. Early 2000s, we added live video feeds and games. Now there's social media, apps, partnerships with Google and Microsoft for tracking maps. But the core hasn't changed. On Christmas Eve, real people, military personnel and volunteers answer phones and talk to children about Santa. How many volunteers now? Over 1,500 on Christmas Eve. They come from all over, military personnel, their families, civilians who want to be part of the tradition. They train them, you know. There's actual training for being a Santa tracker. Julia laughed. What do they teach? How to talk to children at different ages, how to handle special situations, kids who are sick, kids who have lost parents, kids who are anxious, how to be kind and magical while being honest. They don't lie exactly. They just believe alongside the children. There's an art to it. Terence refilled their coffee cups. Your grandmother was a natural at it. That first night in 1955, she created the script we still essentially use. Santa's over Canada now, that's Margaret's phrasing. He's making good time tonight, Margaret. You'd better get to bed, or he might pass right over your house, Margaret. She understood instinctively how to make it real. She's modest about her role. She's a remarkable woman. We all knew it back then. Colonel Shoup relied on her completely that first night. She kept things organized, kept the story consistent, made sure every child who called got an update that made sense based on what she'd told the previous caller. Without her, it might have been chaos. Julia made a note to emphasize her grandmother's role in the article. Can you tell me more about Colonel Shoup? I'd like to understand the man who made the original decision. Terence's expression grew thoughtful. Harry Shoup was a complicated man, brilliant, demanding, sometimes difficult. But he had a kind heart underneath the military bearing. He had 5 children of his own, and I think that made the difference. When that little girl called asking for Santa, he could have been angry about the disruption to military operations. Instead, he saw his own children's faces. He chose wonder over protocol. Did he stay involved with the program until he retired? Even after, he'd come back sometimes on Christmas Eve, especially for milestone anniversaries. He passed away in 2009, but his family has stayed connected to the tradition. His grandchildren volunteer sometimes. Julia spent another hour with Terence, looking through photographs, listening to stories, absorbing the history of how a mistake became a mission. When she finally left, he walked her to her car and handed her a USB drive. "Digital copies of everything I showed you," he said, "and some video interviews I did a few years ago with other veterans of the program. Use whatever helps tell the story." "Thank you," Julia said. "This is incredibly generous. The story deserves to be told right, and your grandmother deserves to be recognized for what she created. That first night, she made magic real. That's worth remembering." Julia drove to the NORAD base with her mind full of images and stories. The facility was impressive, serious security, razor wire fences, guards checking her credentials thoroughly. Captain Stevens met her at the gate, a woman in her early 30s with an efficient manner and a warm smile. "Ms. Chen, welcome to Peterson Space Force Base. We're delighted you're doing a story on the Santa tracking program. It's one of our favorite traditions." She led Julia through security and into a modern building that looked like it could house anything from classified operations to routine administration. They took an elevator down. The archives are below ground, better climate control for historical materials, and emerged into a surprisingly cozy corridor lined with Christmas decorations. "We take the holidays seriously here," Captain Stevens said, noticing Julia's expression. "Even the most secure military installation in North America can have tinsel." The archives room was larger than Julia expected, with rows of filing cabinets, shelves of boxed documents, and several computer stations for accessing digital records. A section along one wall was dedicated entirely to the Santa tracking program. Photographs, letters, newspaper clippings, even old equipment. "This is amazing," Julia breathed. "We started collecting systematically in the 1990s, but a lot of early material was preserved by individuals. Your grandmother, actually, donated several items in the early 2000s. We have the original newspaper advertisement, the one with the misprinted number." Captain Stevens pulled out a carefully preserved copy of the Sears advertisement from December 1955. There it was, a cheerful Santa illustration, and in large type, a phone number that connected to one of the most secure military operations centers in North America. "That's the mistake that changed everything," Julia said softly. "The best mistake in Christmas history," Captain Stevens agreed. "Here, let me show you something special." She led Julia to a glass case containing what looked like an old telephone log, a handwritten ledger with dates, times, and brief notes. The entry for December 24, 1955, showed dozens of tallies after 6 p.m., with notes like "child calling for Santa," "advised he's over Canada," and "another Santa call, give an update." This is the actual log from that first night. You can see where they stopped treating it as an error and started tracking it systematically. Julia photographed the log carefully, then spent 2 hours examining documents, taking notes, and absorbing the evolution of the program. Captain Stevens was patient and knowledgeable, providing context and explaining connections. "Do you participate on Christmas Eve?" Julia asked. "Every year. I answer phones from 8 to midnight. It's my favorite shift of the year. You talk to kids from everywhere: Alaska, Hawaii, military families stationed overseas. Some are excited, some are nervous, some just want to chat about their Christmas. It's pure joy. What do you tell them? Whatever they need to hear. If they're worried Santa won't find their house, I reassure them that our tracking is very precise. If they're excited and want details, I give them flight speed and altitude. We say Santa travels at approximately the speed of starlight, which satisfies the physics-minded kids. If they're young and just want to hear that Santa's coming, I make it magical. Speed of starlight." Captain Stevens grinned. "It's faster than light speed, but sounds more Christmas-y. The kids love it." Before Julia left, Captain Stevens gave her a thumb drive with digitized copies of key documents and contact information for other personnel who'd been part of the program over the years. "We're having a 70th anniversary event on December 20th, she said. "Just for veterans of the program and current participants. You should come. Bring your grandmother. We'd be honored to have her there." "I will. Thank you for all of this." Driving back through Colorado Springs as afternoon faded to evening, Julia felt the story taking shape in her mind. It wasn't just about a misprinted phone number or a clever public relations win. It was about choosing joy, about making space for wonder in serious places, about how small acts of kindness could become traditions that lasted generations. She stopped at an electronics shop and asked about playing reel-to-reel tapes. The young man behind the counter looked doubtful. "Reel-to-reel, that's pretty vintage. We don't have the equipment here, but try Analog Dreams on Cascade Avenue. The owner specializes in vintage audio. If anyone can help, it's him." Analog Dreams was tucked between a coffee shop and a used bookstore. Its window display full of vintage turntables, old radios, and equipment Julia couldn't identify. A bell chimed when she entered, and the smell of old electronics and coffee filled the air. The owner was perhaps 60, with long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and half-moon reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up from a workbench cluttered with components and smiled. "Welcome to Analog Dreams. Looking for anything particular?" "I have a reel-to-reel tape from 1955, Julia said. "I need to play it and hopefully digitize it." His eyes lit up. "Now that's interesting. Let me see it." Julia carefully removed the tape from her bag. He examined it with the gentle reverence of someone who understood old technology. "This is in remarkably good condition. The tape looks stable, no brittleness or deterioration that I can see. I can play it and transfer it to digital for you. Might take a day or two to do it properly." "How much?" "For a tape from 1955. For history, just cover my materials cost, call it $40. But you have to tell me what's on it. Julia smiled. It's from the first NORAD Santa tracking night. Christmas Eve, 1955. His expression transformed into wonder. You're kidding. The actual first night. How did you get this? My grandmother was there. She was one of the operators. Then this definitely gets the historical preservation treatment. Give me your number, and I'll call you when it's ready. This is going to be incredible. Julia left the shop feeling lighter. The pieces were coming together. Her grandmother's memories, Terrence's stories, the official archives, and soon, the actual voices from that first magical night. 2 days later, Julia's phone rang while she was at her grandmother's house, helping string lights on the porch. Miss Chen, this is Richard from Analog Dreams. Your tape is ready, and wow, you need to hear this. They drove to the shop together, Margaret insisting she wanted to be there when the tape was played. Richard had set up a listening station in his back workshop, comfortable chairs, good speakers, and a restored reel-to-reel player that looked like it belonged in a museum. I've transferred it to digital, he said, handing Julia a USB drive. But I thought you'd want to hear it on the original equipment first. There's something about analog sound. He threaded the tape carefully and pressed play. For a moment, there was only the hiss of old recording, the crackle of time itself. Then, voices emerged, distant at first, then clearer. Continental Air Defense Command, Colonel Shoup speaking. Julia looked at her grandmother, whose eyes had filled with tears. A child's voice, small and uncertain. Is this Santa Claus? A pause. Then Colonel Shoup's voice, warmer than before. It is. How can I help you? I wanted to know, is Santa real? My friend Tommy said he isn't. Well, I can see him on my radar right now. He's over Alaska, heading south. Does that answer your question? You can see him, really? Really? We track aircraft here, and Santa's sleigh is showing up very clearly. He's making excellent time tonight. The child's voice filled with joy. Thank you, thank you. I have to tell Tommy. The next voice was different, a young woman, clear and professional. Julia realized it was her grandmother, 7 decades younger. Operation Santa to all stations. Current position over British Columbia, heading southeast. Estimated arrival Rocky Mountain region, 2100 hours. Several male voices acknowledged the update. And there was laughter in the background, warm, genuine laughter. Another call connected. Hello, I'm calling for Santa. This is Santa's tracking station. How may I help you? Well, we're in Florida, and my daughter wants to know when Santa will get here. She's very worried about staying awake. Margaret's voice again, consulting what must have been a map or notes. Santa is currently over Montana, which means he should reach Florida in approximately 3 hours. But he can only visit houses where children are sleeping. so she should go to bed soon. Did you hear that, sweetie? The Air Force says you need to go to bed. The tape continued call after call, each one handled with patience and care. Colonel Shoop's voice appeared regularly, sometimes stern but always kind. Other officers joined in, their military bearings softening as they talked to excited children. And through it all, Margaret's voice provided updates, keeping the story consistent, making magic real through organization and attention to detail. One call stood out. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, his voice shaking. "My dad is in Korea. Can Santa find soldiers?" A pause. Then Colonel Shoop. "Son, I can promise you that Santa visits every good person in the world, and soldiers especially. Your dad will have Christmas, I guarantee it." "How do you know?" "Because I'm a colonel, and I know how these things work. Santa has special clearance to visit military installations. Your father will think of you tomorrow morning, and you think of him, and that's the Christmas magic right there." The boy's voice steadied. "Thank you, sir." "You're welcome. Now you get some sleep. That's an order." The child giggled and hung up. Julia realized she was crying. Beside her, Margaret held a handkerchief to her eyes. The tape ran for 45 minutes, capturing the chaos and joy of that first night. In the background, they could hear telephones ringing constantly, people laughing, someone singing Jingle Bells off-key. There were moments of confusion when calls came in faster than they could answer, moments of coordination as they worked out their system, and moments of pure delight when a child's happiness came through clearly. Near the end, Colonel Shoop's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's midnight. Santa has successfully completed his rounds across North America. Excellent work tonight. Unexpected mission, but I'd say we performed admirably. Margaret, outstanding job keeping us organized. Someone get this lady a commendation." Laughter, applause, and then Margaret's voice, younger but unmistakable. "It was my pleasure, Colonel. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas." The tape ended with the hiss of blank recording. They sat in silence for a long moment. Richard quietly offered tissues. "I'd forgotten," Margaret finally said. "I'd forgotten how happy they were, how we all were. In the middle of the Cold War, on Christmas Eve, we gave ourselves permission to believe. It's beautiful, Grandma. It's proof," Margaret said softly. "Proof that kindness matters, that choosing joy over protocol matters, that one good decision can ripple forward for generations." Richard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Chen, this recording, it's historically significant. Would you consider donating a copy to the Smithsonian or the Air Force Museum? It deserves to be preserved." Margaret looked at Julia. "What do you think?" "I think it should be shared. But I also think we should use it in the article. Let people hear these voices. Hear what that first night was like. Then you decide, dear. It's your story to tell now." They thanked Richard profusely, and Julia promised to send him copies of whatever she wrote. Driving home, through the December twilight, Christmas lights beginning to glow in windows. Julia felt the full weight of the story she was carrying. That evening, she sat in her grandmother's parlor with her laptop, the fire crackling nearby, and began to write. The words flowed easily now that she'd heard those voices, seen those photographs, understood the human choices that had created magic from mistake. She wrote about Colonel Shoop's decision to answer that first call with kindness. She wrote about her grandmother's quick thinking and organizational skills. She wrote about the child who called about his father in Korea and the boy who wanted to believe despite his friend's doubts, and the Florida girl worried about staying awake. She wrote about how the tradition had evolved from chaos to institution, from a handful of confused officers to 1,500 trained volunteers. She wrote about Terence Walsh and Captain Stevens, about the people who kept choosing to participate year after year. But most of all, she wrote about what it meant. That in the midst of serious work, dangerous work, work that dealt with threats and fear, these people had created space for wonder. They'd said yes to childhood joy. They'd treated children's hopes as important as any military mission. Around 11, Margaret brought her tea and cookies, settling into the chair beside her. "How's it coming? I think I have the main article, but I want to do more. I want to find some of those children who called in 1955, see what they remember, find out what the experience meant to them." The letters, Margaret said, there were return addresses on some of them, and names. You could try to track them down. They went back to the attic and spread out the letters, organizing them by location. There were addresses in Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Kansas, New Mexico. Julia photographed each one, nodding names and dates. "This is a long shot," she admitted. "They're all in their 70s now, if they're still alive. They might have moved, but I have to try. Start locally," Margaret suggested. "Here in Colorado Springs. You'd be surprised how many people stay in the same area their whole lives." The next morning, Julia began her search. She started with social media, typing names from the letters into Facebook and LinkedIn. Timothy Morrison, who'd been grateful for the Chicago update. Susan Patterson, worried about Santa finding her new house. David Chen, a coincidence of surnames that made Julia smile, who'd asked about his father in Korea. She found Timothy Morrison in Denver, the same city mentioned in his letter. His Facebook profile showed a man in his 70s with grandchildren, and his posts included lots of Christmas content. She sent him a message explaining her project. Within an hour, he responded, "I remember that call. My parents told me about the wrong number years later. I'd be happy to talk to you." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Denver the following day. Julia also got responses from 2 other letter writers. Susan Patterson, now Susan Green, still living in Colorado Springs, and a woman named Ellen Waverly, whose brother had been one of the callers. The interview with Timothy Morrison was scheduled for the morning. So Julia drove to Denver early, watching the sun rise over the mountains and paint the snow gold and pink. The coffee shop was busy with people buying lattes and holiday treats, the air rich with coffee and cinnamon. Timothy arrived exactly on time, a tall man with white hair and a kind face, wearing a sweater with reindeer on it. He carried a folder. "I brought something," he said after they'd gotten coffee, and settled at a corner table. My mother saved the newspaper clipping about the phone call incident. She thought it was hilarious and wonderful. He opened the folder to reveal the same Colorado Springs Gazette article that Margaret had kept. But this copy had a handwritten note in the margin. Timmy called this number. December 24, 1955. "What do you remember about the call?" Julia asked. Timothy smiled, settling back in his chair. "I was 8 years old. We'd seen the Sears advertisement, and I'd been begging my parents to let me call Santa. They finally said yes on Christmas Eve. I think they expected Santa at Sears to be busy, and I wouldn't get through. But the phone rang and rang, and then this very serious man answered. Military sounding. Official. Colonel Shoup. I didn't know that then. I just knew he didn't sound like the Santa at the mall. But when I asked if he was Santa, there was this pause. I remember it so clearly. And then he said yes. His whole voice changed. He became warmer. He told me Santa was over Chicago, heading west, and that I should go to bed soon. How did you feel? Believed, Timothy said simply. Completely believed. It didn't matter that he didn't sound like mall Santa. He was tracking Santa on radar, which seemed even more official and real. I ran to tell my parents, and my dad called the newspaper because he thought the whole thing was remarkable. Did you know about the wrong number? Not until years later. My parents explained it when I was a teenager. But you know what? It didn't diminish the magic. If anything, it made it more special. These serious military people, tracking threats and protecting the country, took the time to make Christmas real for me. That's extraordinary. Do you have children, grandchildren? 3 grandchildren. And every Christmas Eve, we check the NORAD Santa tracker together. I tell them about the year I called and talked to the Air Force and how that call became this whole tradition. They think it's the coolest thing about their grandpa. Julia interviewed him for an hour, capturing memories and emotions. He talked about how that Christmas Eve call had made him feel special, seen, important. How he'd grown up with faith in institutions because of that one kind interaction. How he'd joined the Air Force himself, partly because of the respect he developed that night for military personnel. I retired as a master sergeant, he said. 30 years of service. And every Christmas Eve, no matter where I was stationed, I made sure to check the Santa tracking. Sometimes I'd volunteer to answer phones when they started allowing civilian military family participation. It was my way of paying forward that gift I'd been given. From Denver, Julia drove to meet Susan Green at her home in Colorado Springs. Susan lived in a cheerful bungalow with a yard full of Christmas decorations, inflatable snowmen, light-up reindeer, a miniature Santa village in the window. "I go overboard," Susan admitted, welcoming Julia inside. "But Christmas has always been magical for me, especially that first one in Colorado." Her living room was equally festive, with 3 Christmas trees of various sizes and dozens of Santa figurines on shelves. "Tell me about your call," Julia prompted, settling on a couch covered in throw pillows shaped like presents. "We just moved from California. My dad got transferred for work. I was 7 and homesick and worried Santa wouldn't know where we were. My mom saw the Sears advertisement and called the number for me because I was too shy. But the person who answered, a woman, very professional, put me on and talked to me directly. That was my grandmother, Margaret Chen." Susan's eyes widened. "Really? Oh, that's wonderful. She was so kind. She told me that Santa had excellent maps and that the Air Force was tracking him very carefully, so he'd definitely find our new house. She asked for my address, and she read it back to me like she was recording it in Santa's official flight plan. I felt so much better. Do you still have the letter you sent?" "I do, I'll show you." Susan disappeared into another room and returned with a scrapbook. Inside, preserved in plastic sleeves, was her letter written in crayon on red construction paper, with drawings of a house and Santa's sleigh. "My mom helped me with the address," Susan explained. "But the words are mine. I wanted to thank them for making sure Santa could find me." "Did Christmas come?" Susan laughed. "It did. And you know what? My parents had wrapped some presents with tags saying, 'From the Air Force Santa Tracker,' as a joke. They'd written things like 'confirmed delivery per radar tracking' and Santa's official Colorado Springs list. I thought it was the most official Christmas ever." "That's adorable. I became a teacher," Susan said, "elementary school. And every December, I tell my students about the NORAD Santa Tracker. We track Santa together on Christmas Eve. I set up a live stream of the website in the classroom during our holiday party. The kids are mesmerized. And I tell them about the year I called, scared and homesick, and the Air Force made everything okay." Julia's third interview was with Ellen Waverly, whose brother Robert had made one of the calls that first night. They met at a tea room downtown, surrounded by Christmas decorations and the gentle clink of china. "Robert passed away 5 years ago," Ellen said softly, stirring honey into her tea. "But he talked about that phone call his whole life. He was 10 when it happened. What did he say about it? That it was the moment he stopped thinking of the military as scary. We grew up during the Cold War, constant drills, fear of bombs, seeing soldiers as connected to war and danger. But that phone call humanized it for him. These were people who tracked threats, but also tracked Santa. They could be serious and playful, strong and kind." Ellen her purse and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young man in Air Force uniform, smiling at the camera. Robert joined the Air Force at 18. He served for 25 years. He used to say that Christmas Eve call planted a seed, showed him that service could mean protecting childhood joy, not just fighting enemies. During his career, he volunteered for the Santa tracking program every single year he could. Did he ever meet Colonel Shoup or any of the others? He met your grandmother once at a reunion in the 90s. He told her she'd changed his life, and she didn't understand what he meant at first. Then he explained he was the kid who'd asked if Santa was real, and she told him yes, with such certainty that he'd believed. He said her voice had the ring of truth, and that taught him truth could be kind. Julia felt tears pricking her eyes again. "That's beautiful." Robert left a letter, Ellen said, pulling out an envelope. He wrote it a few years before he died, when he knew he was sick. He wanted it sent to NORAD's Santa tracking program on the 70th anniversary. "I was going to mail it next week, but maybe you could deliver it. You're more connected to the story than I am." "I'd be honored." The letter was sealed, but Ellen said she'd read it before sealing it. It's his thank you to everyone who participated, everyone who kept the tradition alive, everyone who chose joy. He wrote that Christmas Eve 1955 was the night he learned that the strongest people are those who protect happiness. Julia spent the rest of the week interviewing more people connected to the tradition. A retired general who'd supervised the program in the 1990s, a woman who'd volunteered for 20 years, a technology specialist who'd built the first website, children whose parents had worked on the program. Each conversation added depth and color to the story. She visited schools where teachers incorporated the Santa tracker into lessons about technology, service, and tradition. She attended a training session for new volunteers, watching them learn how to answer calls with warmth and wonder. She spoke with the person who managed the social media accounts, posting updates to millions of followers worldwide. Every person she talked to had the same underlying message. This tradition mattered because it proved that institutions could be human, that serious work could include joy, that choosing kindness was always the right choice. December 20th arrived cold and clear. The sky that intense blue that only comes in winter. Julia and Margaret drove to Peterson Space Force Base together for the 70th anniversary celebration. Margaret wore her nicest dress and the vintage brooch her husband had given her on their first Christmas together. The event was held in a large conference room decorated with photographs from 7 decades of Santa tracking. A timeline stretched along one wall, showing the evolution from handwritten logs to modern apps. Display cases held artifacts, old telephones, early computer equipment, letters from children, newspaper clippings. At least 100 people had gathered, veterans of the program, spanning generations, current personnel, volunteers, and families. Julia recognized Terence Walsh and Captain Stevens, along with several people she'd interviewed. A small stage had been set up at one end of the room, with a podium and microphone. As people mingled, eating cookies and drinking cider, Julia noticed camera crews and reporters. The story had grown beyond her article. Other media had picked up on the anniversary. The official program began at 2 o'clock. A current NORAD commander spoke about the tradition's importance to the organization's public image and morale. Several veterans told stories from different eras. Terence Walsh showed video clips from Christmas Eve's past, children's faces lighting up when told Santa's location. Then the commander called Margaret to the stage. "We have someone very special with us today," he said. Mrs. Margaret Chen was present on the very first night, Christmas Eve 1955, when this tradition began. She was instrumental in creating the tracking protocols we still use today. "Mrs. Chen, would you join me?" Julia helped her grandmother navigate through the crowd to the stage. Margaret looked small up there, but her voice was strong when she spoke into the microphone. "I was 19 years old," she began, "and I had no idea we were starting something that would last 70 years. We were just trying to be kind, trying to make children happy, trying to choose light in a dark time." She talked about that first chaotic evening, about Colonel Shoup's decision, about the joy in the voices of the children who called. She talked about how it felt to track an imaginary sleigh, while the real work of tracking threats continued around them. "The best part," Margaret said, "was that we got to remember why we did our jobs. We protected the country, yes, but ultimately, we were protecting this childhood wonder, Christmas joy, families feeling safe enough to believe in magic." That phone call from the first little girl wasn't an interruption to our work. It was a reminder of what our work was for. The room erupted in applause. Julia saw tears on many faces. After Margaret spoke, the commander made a presentation. "Mrs. Chen, on behalf of NORAD and the entire tradition you helped create, we'd like to honor you with this commemorative plaque and declare you an honorary Santa Tracker, lifetime appointment." He handed her a beautiful wooden plaque engraved with her name, the date, and the Santa tracking logo. Margaret accepted it with grace, her eyes bright. But then the commander continued, "We have one more surprise. We've been searching our archives, and we found something special. Roll the video, please." The lights dimmed, and a screen descended. After a moment of static, black and white footage appeared clearly transferred from old film. It showed the CONAD Operations Center on Christmas Eve 1955. There was Colonel Shoup answering the phone, other officers working at desks, and there, clearly visible in several shots, was Margaret. The footage had sound scratchy and faint, but audible. They heard Colonel Shoup saying, "Yes, I'm Santa. Have you been a good girl?" They heard laughter and telephones ringing. And they heard Margaret's voice, young and clear, Santa's over Montana, making excellent time. Julia watched her grandmother's face as she stared at the screen, watching her 19-year-old self creating magic. The footage ran for 5 minutes, capturing moments from that historic night. When it ended and the lights came back up, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. This footage was discovered 2 weeks ago, the commander said, in a collection of Air Force documentary materials from the 1950s. Someone had been filming routine operations that night and happened to capture this. Mrs. Chen, you and your colleagues gave us a gift that keeps giving. Thank you. The reception afterward was warm and celebratory. People came up to Margaret constantly, wanting to shake her hand, take pictures, hear stories. Julia stayed close, making sure her grandmother wasn't overwhelmed. But Margaret seemed energized by the attention and gratitude. Timothy Morrison found them in the crowd. Mrs. Chen, I'm Timothy. I called that first night, asking about Chicago. Margaret's face lit up. I remember that call. You were so excited. You told me Santa was over the Great Lakes. I believed every word. Thank you for that gift. Susan Green was there too, having driven over with her husband. She hugged Margaret and thanked her for making a scared little girl feel safe. Ellen Waverly presented Robert's letter, and Margaret read it with tears streaming down her face. He was the one who asked if Santa was real, Margaret said softly. Sweet boy. I'm so glad he had a good life. As the event wound down and people began to leave, Captain Stevens approached Julia. I have something for you, she said, handing over a folder. You mentioned wanting to find more of the children who called that first night. We went through our archived letters and cross-referenced them with current phone directories and public records. These are the names and contact information for 12 more people who wrote to us in December 1955. They might be willing to talk to you. This is incredible. Thank you. Thank your grandmother. She's the reason this tradition exists. The least we can do is help tell her story properly. Driving home as sunset painted the snow pink and gold, Margaret was quiet, holding her plaque and Robert's letter. Penny for your thoughts, Grandma. I was just thinking about Harry Shoup, about how one small choice, answering that phone call with kindness instead of irritation, created all of this. 70 years of magic, millions of happy children, a tradition that spans the globe. He could have said no. He could have been angry about the disruption. But he chose yes. You chose yes too, Julia said. You made it work. You created the system. We all chose yes. Everyone in that room that night. And every year since, thousands of people have chosen yes. That's what gets me, not that we started something, but that it kept going. That in every generation, people decided this mattered enough to continue. They stopped at a red light, and Julia looked at her grandmother. I found something I want to show you when we get home. At the house, Julia pulled out her laptop and opened a folder. I've been tracking the NORAD Santa tracker statistics over the years. last Christmas Eve, the website had over 15 million visitors from 200 countries. Volunteers answered 140,000 phone calls. The social media posts were viewed 2.6 billion times. Billion. Your 5-minute improvisation on Christmas Eve 1955 became something that reaches billions of people. Children in Japan, Brazil, Kenya, Norway, everywhere. All because you and Colonel Shoup and the others chose to track Santa instead of turning away children. Margaret shook her head in wonder. How did this happen? It happened because joy spreads. Because people recognized something true and beautiful and wanted to participate. Because the story itself is so perfect, a military mistake becoming Christmas magic. It reminds everyone that accidents can become blessings, that serious people can be playful, that the world has room for wonder. That evening, they watched the NORAD Santa Tracker website together, even though Christmas Eve was still days away. The site was already active with games, stories, and countdown timers. They watched a video about the history of the program, and there was Margaret's name listed among the founding participants. "I'm on the internet," Margaret said, amused. "You're part of history, Grandma." Julia spent the next few days finishing her article, incorporating all the interviews, the archival material, the anniversary celebration, and the newly discovered film footage. She wrote about the human chain of kindness that had sustained the tradition, from Colonel Shoup to her grandmother, to Timothy Morrison, to Robert Waverley, to Captain Stevens, and thousands of others. She wrote about what the tradition represented, that even in dangerous times, maybe especially in dangerous times, protecting joy matters. That children's hopes are worthy of serious attention. That mistakes can become miracles when met with kindness. Her article filled 6 pages and included photographs spanning 70 years. Her editor loved it and scheduled it for Christmas Eve publication, the 70th anniversary of that first phone call. But Julia also created something else, an audio documentary. She wove together the recording from 1955, her interviews with Timothy and Susan and Ellen, clips from her conversation with Terence Walsh, and her grandmother's voice describing that first night. She included readings from the children's letters and the sounds of modern-day volunteers answering calls. The documentary ended with Margaret reading Robert Waverley's letter. "Dear friends of the Santa tracking program, I am writing this knowing I won't be here for your 70th anniversary, but I wanted my gratitude to reach you anyway. On Christmas Eve 1955, I was a scared 10-year-old boy wondering if Santa was real, if magic existed, if the world had room for wonder. A woman with a kind voice told me yes. She told me with such certainty that I believed. That belief changed my life. It taught me that truth and kindness can coexist, that serious work can include joy, that protecting happiness is a worthy mission. I spent my career in the Air Force trying to embody those lessons. Every Christmas Eve, answering calls from children asking about Santa, I tried to be for them what that woman was for me, a voice of certainty and wonder. Thank you for keeping this tradition alive. Thank you for choosing, year after year, to track magic. In a world that often feels dark, you are people who point toward light. With gratitude and love, Colonel Robert Waverly, USAF, retired. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and temperatures just below freezing. Perfect Christmas weather. Julia woke in her grandmother's guest room to the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls. The same scents from every Christmas morning of her childhood. Her article had published online at midnight and was already generating responses. People from around the world were commenting, sharing their own memories of calling the Santa tracker, thanking Margaret and the other veterans, celebrating the tradition. The Denver Post had promoted it as their lead Christmas Eve story, and other outlets were picking it up. Julia's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers who'd been moved by the story. But the best message came from Captain Stevens. Your article is perfect. We're sharing it across all NORAD channels. Thank you for honoring this tradition, and Mrs. Chen. P.S. We've had double the usual number of volunteer applications for next year. People want to be part of the magic. Julia found Margaret in the kitchen, wearing her favorite Christmas sweater, red, with a sparkly Christmas tree, and listening to carols on the radio. Merry Christmas, Grandma. Merry Christmas, darling. Your article is beautiful. I've been reading the comments, so many people sharing their memories. It's because of you. You gave them something worth remembering. They spent the morning baking cookies, gingerbread men and sugar cookies cut into stars and trees. They watched the snow fall and wrapped last-minute presents. Julia helped Margaret set the table for Christmas dinner, using the good china with holly patterns and the crystal glasses that had been wedding gifts decades ago. Around 3 o'clock, guests began arriving. Julia had invited Timothy Morrison and his family, Susan Green and her husband, and Ellen Waverly. Terence Walsh came with his daughter. Captain Stevens stopped by briefly, still in uniform, on her way to the base for her volunteer shift. The house filled with laughter and conversation. Timothy's grandchildren were delighted to meet the woman who'd helped track Santa for their grandfather. Susan brought cookies shaped like Santa's sleigh. Ellen gave Margaret a framed photograph of her brother Robert in his Air Force uniform, smiling beside a Christmas tree. As evening fell and the Christmas lights came on the tree, on the porch, in windows, all along Maple Street, they gathered in the living room. Julia had set up speakers connected to her laptop. I want to share something, she said. A recording that ties all of us together. She played the audio documentary, and they listened to the voices from 1955 mixed with voices from today, hearing the chain of kindness across 70 years. When Margaret's young voice came through the speakers, Santa's over Canada now, making excellent time. Everyone looked at her with wonder and gratitude. When the recording ended with Robert's letter, Ellen was crying softly. He would have loved this, being here, meeting all of you, knowing the story was being told. He's here, Margaret said firmly. Everyone who ever participated is here. That's the magic of tradition. It connects us across time. At 8 o'clock, Timothy and Susan said they needed to get home. Santa would be tracked soon, and their families had made it a tradition to watch together. They thanked Margaret profusely, hugging her and promising to stay in touch. After they left, Julia and Margaret stood at the front window, watching snow fall through the glow of Christmas lights. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional sound of children's laughter, doors closing, families gathering. "How do you feel?" Julia asked. About all of this, the article, the recognition, the anniversary. Margaret thought for a moment. Grateful, surprised, but mostly grateful. For 70 years, this tradition has been out in the world, bringing joy, and I got to be there at the beginning. I got to help create something that matters. How many people can say that? You did more than help create it, Grandma. You made it work. Your voice, your certainty, your kindness, that's what made children believe. We all made them believe. Harry Shoup, when he said yes to that first little girl. The officers who answered calls, even though it wasn't in their job description. The volunteers who have kept it going. Every person who chose joy over protocol. Julia pulled out her phone and opened the NORAD Santa Tracker website. Speaking of which, the site showed Santa's sleigh leaving the North Pole, beginning his journey around the world. A counter showed thousands of people watching, and the number climbed as they looked. "He's starting his rounds," Margaret said softly. "Just like every year. Because of you. Because of all of us." They stood together at the window as full darkness fell, watching snow accumulate on the pine branches in the yard, seeing lights glow in every window on the street, feeling the peace of Christmas Eve settle over everything. Julia's phone buzzed a message from the NORAD volunteer operations. "Tonight, we're tracking Santa, but we're also tracking something else. How many people mention your article when they call? So far, dozens have thanked us and said they never knew the real story. Your grandmother's legacy is alive and well. Merry Christmas." Julia showed Margaret the message. Her grandmother smiled and touched the window, where frost was forming in delicate patterns. "You know what I think," Margaret said. "I think Colonel Shoup knew exactly what he was doing when he answered that first call. He saw an opportunity to choose light, and he took it. And he taught the rest of us to do the same. Choose light. In every situation, you can choose to add light or darkness, kindness or indifference, joy or bitterness. He chose light, and that light has been shining for 70 years. It will shine for 70 more and beyond. That's the real gift, not the tradition itself, but what it represents. The choice to believe in goodness, to protect wonder, to say yes when you could say no." Julia leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder. Outside, a family walked past, children bundled in winter coats, pointing at the Christmas lights and laughing. Their voices carried through the quiet night, clear and bright as bells. "I want to show you something else," Julia said, pulling up her email. "Since the article published, I've received over 300 messages. People sharing their memories, thanking you, telling their own stories." She scrolled through them, reading a few aloud. "I called the Santa tracker in 1987 when I was 6 years old. The volunteer who answered spent 10 minutes talking to me about Christmas and my new baby sister. I'm 43 now, and I still remember how special that conversation made me feel. Thank you for telling the real story. My father was a NORAD volunteer from 1995 to 2010. He passed away last year, but every Christmas Eve, he would come home from his volunteer shift, glowing with happiness. He said those phone calls reminded him why he joined the military, to protect joy. Your article honored his memory. I'm a teacher in Tokyo. We track Santa with our students every year using the NORAD website. I never knew it started with a wrong number and a kind colonel. Tomorrow, I'll tell my students this story, and we'll talk about how mistakes can become miracles." Margaret listened to each one, her eyes bright with tears and wonder. All these people, all these years, all connected by one Christmas Eve. Your Christmas Eve, Julia corrected gently. Our Christmas Eve. It belongs to everyone now. They moved to the couch, wrapped in afghans. The Christmas tree, lights casting patterns on the ceiling. Margaret opened the wooden box that had started everything and carefully removed the photographs, spreading them across the coffee table. "Tell me more about that night," Julia said. "What were you thinking while it was happening?" Margaret picked up the photograph of herself at 19, barely visible at the edge of the frame. "I was thinking about my own childhood Christmases. My parents had immigrated from China. When I was 3, we lived in San Francisco. Christmas was new to them, something they learned about from neighbors and school. But they embraced it completely because they saw how magical it was for me." She touched the photo gently. "My mother would save all year to buy one special gift. My father would take me to see the department store windows. They made Christmas real for me, even though it wasn't their tradition. So when those children called asking about Santa, I understood what was at stake. I understood that someone was trying to make magic for them, just like my parents had made it for me. You were paying it forward. I suppose I was. And now, 70 years later, millions of people are paying it forward. Each volunteer who answers the phone, each parent who helps their child track Santa, each person who shares the joy there, all saying yes to wonder. They're all choosing light." Julia checked her phone again. The NORAD website showed Santa crossing the Pacific, heading toward Asia. The view counter had climbed past 1 million. "Grandma, how does it feel knowing that right now, as we sit here? Over 1 million people are tracking Santa because of what you started." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow fall through the window. It feels like responsibility, not burden, but responsibility. It reminds me that our choices matter, that kindness ripples out in ways we can't predict. It makes me want to be more careful with my choices, more intentional about adding light. You've added so much light. We all have the opportunity to add light. That's what the story teaches. Colonel Shoup wasn't doing anything extraordinary. He was just being kind in a moment when kindness wasn't required. That's available to everyone, every day. Julia's laptop chimed with a video call request. She recognized the name, one of the volunteers at NORAD she'd interviewed, a young captain named Martinez, who was working the Christmas Eve shift. "May I answer it?" Julia asked. Of course. Captain Martinez's face appeared on screen, the operations center visible behind him, decorated with garland and lights. The room buzzed with activity, people answering phones, working computers, smiling. "Ms. Chen, Mrs. Chen, I hope I'm not interrupting Christmas Eve, but I had to show you this." He turned his phone camera to show the operations floor. A large banner hung across one wall. 70 years of tracking Santa. Thank you, Margaret Chen, and the class of 1955. "We made it this afternoon, after reading your article," Captain Martinez explained. "Everyone here wanted to honor the people who started this. Mrs. Chen, you're a legend here." Margaret pressed her hand to her chest, clearly moved. "Thank you. That's very kind. It's not just us," he continued. "Look at this." He showed them a board where volunteers had posted notes. "Answering calls tonight in honor of Colonel Shoup and Mrs. Chen. My grandmother called the Santa tracker in 1967. Tonight, I'm keeping the tradition alive for my grandchildren. First year volunteering. Proud to be part of 70 years of magic." "The phones are ringing off the hook," Captain Martinez said. "We're already past 50,000 calls, and it's only 8:30. Your article is bringing people in. They want to be part of the story." "That's wonderful," Julia said. "Mrs. Chen, would you like to answer one call? For old time's sake." Margaret looked uncertain. "I don't know if I remember how. It's exactly the same as it was in 1955, he assured her. "Just be yourself. Be kind. Tell them what you see." Margaret looked at Julia, who nodded encouragingly. "I think you should, Grandma." "All right then." Captain Martinez patched through a call. A child's voice came through the laptop speakers, small and excited. "Hello, is this really the Santa tracker?" Margaret's voice took on that same warmth Julia had heard in the 1955 recording. "Yes, sweetheart, this is the Santa tracker. How can I help you? I want to know where Santa is. Is he coming to Montana? Let me check my screen here. Yes, Santa is currently over the Pacific Ocean, and he's making excellent time tonight. He should reach Montana in about 2 hours. Are you ready for bed?" "Almost. I just wanted to make sure he was coming." "Oh, he's definitely coming. He's visited thousands of homes already tonight. and Montana is next on his list. But remember, he can only visit houses where children are sleeping. I'll go to bed right now. Thank you. You're very welcome. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. The call disconnected. Margaret sat back, her eyes shining. That voice, that hope, it's exactly the same as it was 70 years ago. Because wonder doesn't change, Captain Martinez said. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That little girl will remember this night forever, just like the children you talked to in 1955 remember theirs. After they said goodbye and ended the call, Margaret and Julia sat in companionable silence. The house was warm and quiet, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. I think I understand now, Julia said softly, why this story matters so much. It's not really about Santa or Christmas or even tradition. What's it about then? It's about seeing opportunities for kindness and taking them. It's about institutions being human. It's about how we choose to show up in the world, whether we choose protocol or joy, rules or wonder, efficiency or magic. Margaret nodded slowly. And it's about remembering that serious work and playful work aren't opposites. The people tracking threats can also track Santa. The people protecting us can also protect childhood dreams. We don't have to choose between being responsible and being joyful. Colonel Shoup understood that. He did, and he taught it to everyone who came after him. That's true leadership, not just accomplishing your mission, but showing others how to live with both strength and gentleness. Julia thought about her article, about the hundreds of responses she'd received, about Timothy and Susan and Robert, and all the others whose lives had been touched by one Christmas Eve decision. Grandma, do you think you'll volunteer next year? Answer calls on Christmas Eve. Margaret smiled. I'm 90 years old, dear. I don't know if they want ancient operators. I think they'd be honored. And I think children would love knowing they're talking to someone who was there from the very beginning. Perhaps we'll see how I feel next December. But you know what I'd really like? What? I'd like for you to volunteer. Carry it forward another generation. Be part of the story you've told. Julia hadn't considered it, but as soon as Margaret said it, it felt right. I'd love that. I'll sign up in January. Good. Then the Chen family tradition continues. Your grandfather would be so pleased. They stayed up until midnight, watching the NORAD tracker follow Santa's progress around the globe, reading the flood of comments on Julia's article, answering messages from people who wanted to share their memories. The snow continued falling, blanketing the world in white, muffling sound and softening edges. At midnight, the grandfather clock chimed 12 times. Margaret stood and stretched. Merry Christmas, Julia. Merry Christmas, Grandma. They hugged, and Julia felt the weight of the day, the week, the entire story settling into her bones. She'd set out to write an article about a local holiday tradition. She'd discovered something much larger a story about kindness multiplying across decades, about mistakes becoming miracles, about choosing light in every moment. As they said goodnight and climbed the stairs to their rooms, Julia paused at her grandmother's door. "Thank you for calling me about the phone in the attic. Thank you for sharing all of this." Margaret smiled. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding that it mattered. Thank you for telling it with love." In her room, Julia checked her phone one last time. The NORAD Santa tracker showed millions of people online, watching the sleigh cross continents, following the magic. Her article had been shared thousands of times, with people all over the world reading about that first Christmas Eve in 1955. But the message that made her cry came from Timothy Morrison. "Julia, I just finished tracking Santa with my grandchildren. I told them the whole story, the wrong number, your grandmother's kindness, how I called that night." My granddaughter asked, "Did that lady make Santa real?" I said, "No, sweetie. She made kindness real. And that's even better. Thank you for giving me the words to explain what that Christmas Eve meant. Merry Christmas." Julia set down her phone and looked out the window. The snow had stopped and the sky had cleared. Stars blazed overhead, bright and cold and infinite. Somewhere out there, a million families were tracking an imaginary sleigh, connecting across time zones and languages and cultures through shared wonder. And it had all started here, in this city, with a misprinted phone number and a colonel who chose yes. Christmas Eve, 1 year later. Julia stood in the NORAD Operations Center, wearing her volunteer badge and headset, surrounded by hundreds of others who'd chosen to spend their Christmas Eve making magic real for children around the world. The room hummed with activity, phones ringing, people talking, laughter, and joy mixing with professional efficiency. The banner from last year still hung on the wall. 70 years of tracking Santa. Julia's station was near the window, where she could see snow falling over Colorado Springs. Her grandmother sat beside her in a comfortable chair, officially present as honorary Santa tracker, senior advisor. At 90, Margaret had insisted on coming, though she'd agreed to just observe rather than answer calls herself. Nervous, Margaret asked, "A little. What if I say the wrong thing?" "There's no wrong thing. Just be kind. Just be present. Just make them feel heard." Julia's phone rang her first call. She took a deep breath and answered. "NORAD Santa Tracker, this is Julia. How can I help you?" A child's voice, bright with excitement. "Where's Santa?" Julia looked at her screen, at the tracker showing Santa's progress across Africa. She thought about Colonel Shoup and her grandmother, about Timothy and Susan and Robert, about 70 years of people choosing joy. "Santa is over Kenya right now," she said, warmth flooding her voice, "and he's making excellent time." "Where are you calling from?" "Nebraska." "Well, he'll be in Nebraska in about 3 hours. Are you ready for bed?" "Not yet. I wanted to know if he has our new address. We moved." Julia smiled, remembering Susan's story. Santa has the best navigation system in the world. He definitely has your new address. But you need to be asleep when he arrives. Those are the rules. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. The call ended. Julia looked at her grandmother, who was beaming. Perfect, Margaret said. Exactly right. The phone rang again, and again, and again. For 4 hours, Julia answered calls, tracked Santa's progress, reassured worried children, celebrated with excited families, and added her voice to 71 years of volunteers who'd chosen to spend Christmas Eve protecting wonder. Around 11 o'clock, Captain Stevens approached their station. Mrs. Chen, there's someone here who wants to meet you. A young woman in Air Force uniform stood nearby, holding the hand of a little girl about 6 years old. Mrs. Chen, this is Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, and this is her daughter, Emma. Morrison, Margaret said. Are you related to Timothy Morrison? The young woman smiled. He's my father. He told me about calling you in 1955, about how that conversation changed his life, how it led him to join the Air Force. I followed in his footsteps. I'm a pilot now. And tonight, I brought Emma here to see where the magic happens. Emma stepped forward shyly. My great-grandpa called you when he was little. He said you made Santa real. Margaret knelt down slowly, bringing herself to Emma's level. Well, your great-grandpa helped me understand something important. That kindness is the realest magic there is. And you know what? Now you're part of the story too. You came here tonight. You saw how we track Santa. And someday you'll tell your own children about this moment. Will Santa find our house? We have a new puppy, and I'm worried she'll bark. Margaret laughed, that warm, genuine laugh that Julia knew so well. Santa loves puppies. He won't mind one bit. But you should get home and get to sleep soon. He's almost to Colorado. After they left, Margaret returned to her chair, moving carefully. Julia noticed how tired she looked. Grandma, do you want to go home? We can leave whenever you're ready. Not yet. I want to stay until midnight. I want to be here when Santa completes his journey, just like I was 71 years ago. At 11:45, the operations center grew quieter as Santa's tracker showed him finishing his rounds across the Pacific, heading back toward the North Pole. The phone calls slowed. Volunteers stretched and smiled, sharing stories from their evening. Captain Stevens stepped to a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, in 15 minutes, Santa will complete another successful journey around the world. Tonight, we answered over 175,000 calls and had more than 20 million website visitors. Thank you all for your service, your kindness, and your commitment to this wonderful tradition. She paused. This year marked the 71st anniversary of the first Santa tracking call. We're honored to have with us tonight Margaret Chen, who was present on that first Christmas Eve in 1955. Mrs. Chen, would you like to give the final update? Margaret stood slowly, Julia steadying her. She walked to the microphone, and the room fell silent. "Thank you," Margaret said, her voice clear despite her age. 71 years ago tonight, a little girl called a wrong number and asked if she was talking to Santa. A kind colonel said yes, and in that moment, something beautiful was born. She looked around the room at all the faces, young and old, military and civilian. People from every background united in a single purpose. Tonight, you've answered thousands of calls. You've reassured worried children and celebrated with excited families. You've made magic real. But more than that, you've chosen kindness. You've chosen joy. You've chosen to say yes when you could have said no. That's the real gift you've given, not information about Santa's location, but proof that goodness exists, that people care, that wonder is worth protecting. Her voice grew stronger. In 1955, we tracked Santa on Christmas Eve because we wanted to remember what we were protecting, not just airspace or security, but the ability of children to believe in magic. 71 years later, that mission continues. You are all protectors of wonder. Never doubt that this work matters. She paused, looking at the countdown clock. In 60 seconds, Santa will complete his journey. 60 seconds until Christmas morning. I'd like to make one final tracking update, if I may. The room waited, silent, except for the soft hum of equipment. Margaret smiled. Santa has successfully visited every home where children believe. He's heading back to the North Pole now, making excellent time, mission accomplished. And thanks to all of you, thanks to everyone who's ever answered these phones, or tracked this journey, or said yes to wonder. He'll be back again next year. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas. The room erupted in applause. The clock struck midnight. Christmas had arrived. Julia hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling the fragility of her bones, the strength of her spirit, the weight of 7 decades of kindness rippling forward. "Thank you," Julia whispered, "for all of it. Thank you for being here with me, for carrying it forward, for understanding that it matters." They drove home through silent streets, through neighborhoods where lights still glowed in windows, and stockings, hung from mantels, and families slept peacefully, dreaming of magic and morning. At home, Margaret went straight to bed, exhausted but happy. Julia made herself tea and sat in the parlor, the Christmas tree lights casting their gentle glow. She opened her laptop and began to write. 1 year ago, I discovered a phone in my grandmother's attic and began to unravel the story of how the NORAD Santa tracker was born. Tonight, I completed that story by becoming part of it, by answering calls, tracking Santa, and adding my voice to 71 years of volunteers who have chosen joy. The story isn't about a wrong number or a military tradition or even about Santa Claus. It's about the choice each of us makes every day to add light or darkness to the world. It's about saying yes when we could say no. It's about protecting wonder when we could protect only efficiency. My grandmother taught me that kindness ripples forward in ways we can't predict. That one good choice can become 70 years of magic. That mistakes can become miracles when met with grace. Tonight, I watched that lesson multiply across the globe as millions of people tracked Santa together, connected by technology, but united by something deeper, the shared belief that protecting childhood joy matters, that institutions can be human, that serious work and playful work are not opposites, but partners. This is the gift of the NORAD Santa Tracker, not the information it provides, but the reminder it offers. That goodness exists, that people care, that wonder is worth protecting, that we can all choose light. Merry Christmas from Colorado Springs, where 71 years ago, a little girl called a wrong number and received an answer that changed the world. Julia saved the file and closed her laptop. Through the window, she could see the first hints of dawn brightening the eastern sky. Christmas morning was here. Upstairs, her grandmother slept peacefully, surrounded by 71 years of memories, knowing that the light she'd helped kindle in 1955 still burned bright, would burn for decades more, would never be extinguished as long as people chose kindness over convenience, wonder over cynicism, yes over no. Julia pulled an afghan around her shoulders and watched the sky turn from black to navy to pale blue. Snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the world in fresh white. In her hand, she held the paper tag from the phone that had started everything. The Santa phone, 1955. She smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered into the quiet Christmas morning, "Thank you for the wrong number. Thank you for the yes. Thank you for 71 years of light." Outside, the world woke to Christmas. Inside, the story continued as it always would, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation. A reminder that our choices matter, that kindness multiplies, and that sometimes the most beautiful traditions begin with a simple mistake and a willingness to believe in magic. Epilogue note: the NORAD Santa Tracker continues to this day, with thousands of volunteers answering calls and millions of people worldwide tracking Santa's journey every Christmas Eve. The tradition that began with a misprinted phone number in 1955 stands as a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of wonder, and the beautiful things that can happen when we choose joy. Colonel Harry Shoup passed away in 2009, but his legacy, and the legacy of all those who have participated over the decades, lives on in every child who calls asking where Santa is, and in every volunteer who answers, "Let me check the radar."